introduce yourself and
Sure.
tell us.
Thank you. I am Connie Reguli. I am here from the heart of America, Tennessee, and I've been fighting for families for 28 years in the American legal system until they canceled me and kicked me out because I fought too hard. And I, what you all have heard about Sweden and Norway, I just have to say, in America, we do things bigger and better. So on any given day of the year, we have 500,000 children in out-of-home placements in foster care, and it's extremely disturbing. And I think that internationally, they must have a pattern somewhere along the line, because everything that you've said today, and I've used Google Translate and been able to pick up a lot of your messages in Norwegian and Swedish, and a lot of those same messages. The doctors taking children, taking babies out of the mother's arms in the hospitals. We had a rash in the United States of what's called premature osteopenia of prematurity, and they're very, very soft ribs in babies, and literally babies' ribs will fracture on just a day-to-day handling them, and these babies will have 29 fractures, but not a single bone is broken. There's no displacement, there's no injuries, there's no bruises, and we have doctors who sit on the stand and say the only way that baby could have those fractures is if those parents pick that baby up and crush the baby. And finally, I located 2 doctors in the whole entire United States who would say, no, this is a disease and it cures. And when you take the baby out of the home and you put it in a foster home, and all of a sudden 6 months later there's, quote, no fractures, is because it is cured. And so we have a rash of parents reaching out because of problems with children, with needing special help, and then they take the children into care. We have psychologists who claim the parents are crazy when the parents reach out and try to get some extra help. So out of our 500,000 children in foster care, we know in the United States that 85% of those children are there under this broad term of neglect. And half of those children are there because there is some form or claim of substance abuse, which could be smoking marijuana on the weekends to daily meth use. There is like no distinction. It's just this broad category of drug-exposed environment or drug-exposed child. So this other 45% is under some definition of neglect that we don't even know what it is. It could be truancy, it could be wanting a second opinion, it could be, they haven't gone quite so far as to say lack of parental responsibility, but they use the judicial cliche of it's contrary to the welfare of the child to remain in the care of the parents. And so I started when I noticed this, and this was a second career for me. My family was a very successful restaurant operation, and I went back to law school at 38 years old. And then I adopted 3 children from Russia, and I was trying to have a career and raise my children, and I thought I was going to have a normal career of just being prepared. And then I started seeing this extremely aggressive government tactics. And so I started finding out why, asking why. And one of the first things I found on the internet was Nancy Schafer's speech from here in 2010, I believe. 2 years later, she was dead. And we've also had state senator.
Excuse me, she wasn't dead, she was murdered.
She was murdered. Yes. We also had in 2018, Arkansas State Senator Linda Collins get murdered when she was about to expose $50 million missing out of the Arkansas child welfare budget. So we know foster care does not work. We know it does not work. And let me see, where's my green phone? Would you hand me that one? Nope, right here. Yep. Yeah. So, we know that foster care is a social engineering program that fails. Okay, we know it fails. And it's in the United States, we have those statistics. And let me tell you. So we know that of human trafficking in the United States, that 86% of the children that are trafficked come from foster care. We know that 60% of the youth that end up incarcerated have had an experience with foster care. We know that 47% of the older youth that are taken will not graduate from high school on time. We know that 97% of the children that have experienced foster care will never go to college. And we know that 51% of our homeless population has had experience with foster care. We know it is a social experiment that does not work. And so what do? So one thing God gave me is a gift of voice. And so I started developing through social media a platform in the United States of collecting families from across the country. And actually that's how I met Jasmine. She found me out of Switzerland. But I have 17,000 people in the United States of families from all over the different states. And we have the Family Forward Project on Facebook. And I started going to those states and speaking, very small groups, sometimes larger groups. We go to Washington, D.C. I take clutches of people to Washington, D.C. and I train these families, these hurt, damaged families. I train them to be activists and lobbyists on their own. So in September, we took 14 people, me and another really strong advocate out of Connecticut. We took 14 people to Washington, D.C. We taught them how to do the emails and make the appointments and sit down and do presentations. We trained them to do that. And we put a plan together. And what is our plan? In 2018, before the pandemic, we could walk through the buildings and knock on the doors and just walk in and talk to people. And then the pandemic, and I would happen to be there ground zero on day one, March the 12th of 2020, when they shut us out of the buildings. And we were not able to go back again until this September. So we finally are able to get in the buildings, but we went with a plan. So as I started studying how did America get to this place, I started looking at the laws. And in 1974, we had CAPTA, which was the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which was passed by, also called the Mondale Act. And that was the first just gush of money that went from the federal money to the states. And of course, it's all associated with foster care. So all the money goes for out-of-home placement. In the United States, for the states, because they have state tax dollars and federal tax dollars. So it is a dollar for dollar match. It is never subject to sequester, and it's a use it or lose it scheme. So the states, if you look at the statistics for any state, they have a quota of children that they take every year. And so Tennessee has a number that's about 7,000 children, and every year they're going to take 7,000 children and put them in foster care. And of course, it's privatized. I started watching the Tennessee budget that went up $50 million a year. It is now $1 billion a year just for that one state that is probably almost about the size of Norway, probably a little bit less, but somewhere around 4 million people. So what else? So then, of course, after CAPTA, 20 years later, we had all these children that were lost. We had a lot of class action lawsuits in the United States, and they created the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which was the act that said that now we're going to give the states a bonus check if they adopt a child out. So the states actually get a bonus check for $10,000 to $12,000 when they finalize an adoption. For the state of Tennessee, that was $768,000 last year. Complete funny money, okay? They don't have to use it for any particular thing. We don't even know where it goes. It doesn't even have a line item on the state budget. And so we, through our lobbying efforts in 2018, we got past the Family First Prevention and Services Act, and it did 4 things. And the first thing it did was it said that you could use that money that we said you could only use when you did foster care, that you could use it for services 12 months prior to removal. Sounds like a great idea, because remember, we're dealing with 85% of these children in neglect situations. Secondly, is it created a kinship navigator so that we had more children that would go into kinship. The third thing it said is group homes are horrible. They're horrendous. The children are treated bad there. They're a failure. We need to close group homes. And then the fourth thing was that we needed to provide services for foster children who become pregnant. A very sad state of affairs, but that was part of the program. So we implemented this. It passed in February 2018. Our group was hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. We're so excited. We're so excited. And then I feel like ditto. It'd be Marius up here saying, well, we got that. And nobody did anything about it. So they did not implement it. All of the states came in and ask that the deadline be pushed farther and farther and farther and farther down the road. And so then we got another bill passed that more money would be flushed into it. So we're still trying to get that bill implemented. It's only being even considered in 19 of the 50 United States. So the most recent thing we have is we have CAPTA reauthorization. So the 1974 bill is now up for reauthorization, and it's a very long, very cumbersome, very hard to read bill. I've read through the whole thing. There are some changes that are occurring in that I'm hopeful of. And one of them is family advocacy. So one of the things our group is doing is saying we want a family advocate bill, because families cannot navigate this system when they get pushed into it. There are too many things. There's too many rules, too many administrative procedures, too many meetings. Their attorneys don't have time for them. They don't know. They walk in blindsided because they think it's going to be fair. They think it's going to be just. They think that they're going to be treated properly and fairly throughout the system, and it's adversarial from day one. And I have said that the agencies cannot call themselves a service agency like the Department of Children's Services and then be a stealing child agency. It is a controversy and a conflict of interest internal to the system. And ultimately, the systems have to be broken into child protective services versus family services. You cannot have that internal conflict. It also is extremely privatized. And I have sat in the meetings with the foster care companies who are quote unquote providing services. And I've said to them, you cannot have your hands in both pockets. You cannot be getting a per diem every day off the head of a child and then turn around and tell me that you're trying to rehabilitate that family when all you get is $35 for a therapy session versus $1,000 for the child. They take children from poor parents. They then give the foster parents $1,000 per month per child, tax-free, free medical care, free transportation, free whatever else you want. And then they order the poor parent to pay child support. And when they can't pay child support, they will terminate parental rights on the failure to pay child support alone. That is where we are. And I try to watch my state lawmakers and listen. And I'm losing so much hope on them. 2 years ago, they passed a law that said that if there is an open investigation on you and you change your child's school enrollment, it's a misdemeanor. Not if you've ever been convicted, not if they've ever put a court order down on you. If they just have an investigation open on you, and if you leave the state, it's a felony. So that is, and that's just an investigation. And I can't believe it passed my legislative body in the Tennessee, which is very conservative. It passed 100%. Nobody even said, wait a minute, parents still have the right to make educational decisions. They came after me. My story is such a small part of the story, but the reason I can be here is because they canceled me and criminalized me. But I finally put my foot down about the secret orders that they were getting behind the backs of parents, and I tried to protect a disabled 12-year-old child from being removed from her mother, who had never been away from her mother, based upon the false allegations of a teenager in the household who was frustrated because they wanted to, sell drugs and have their girlfriend to the house. And so I put my foot down because they snuck behind my back. They got an ex parte order. I brought them 2 hours away to where my home was. I had called them. I had told them I was her attorney. I said, we'll cooperate with you. We want to meet with you. We'll participate in the investigation. Instead of a phone call back to me, they surrounded my house with 6 police cars, and they took the child, and then I fought for 10 months. I got the child back to the mother. They dismissed the case, and then they came and arrested me and my client for custodial interference. And the only way they could come after us is if they would change the law, literally. Nobody believes me when I say this, but the judge and the prosecutor rewrote the law to be able to prosecute us. So the jury had no choice. It was a comedy of errors. It was like being in a surreal world that they could do this. But they were able to criminalize me and give me a felony, and part of the reason they had to do that was because I had decided to run for juvenile court judge to remedy a lot of these situations. They could not allow me to be a judge. They could not. The system could not bear that burden of me being able to correct some of these actions and be public about it. So I'm very public. They hate my voice. They're scared of my voice. But let me tell you, even though they criminalized me and they put me on 2 years probation, which I'm not on probation yet because I'm what's called ROR, which is released on your own recognizance during my whole entire appeal process. I've never been in jail yet, but they sentenced me to serve 30 days in jail. And the county attorney came to court and said they were afraid to put me in their jail because I was too disruptive. I am 70 years old. I've never had a crime in my life. And the reason she said I was too disruptive is because she said I had gone on social media and accused the sheriff of locking up children to give them psych meds and give them vaccines. And so they are so afraid of me now that they had to cancel me. So I am not going to be canceled. I was invited by Jasmine in Switzerland a couple weeks ago. She did she's putting herself out there, trying to do an international platform, because I think it is education and awareness, and then to activate. Our children are being objectified and monetized. And it's such a great commodity because you don't have to grow it or feed it or manufacture it. I mean, children are born every day and they are so innocent and so vulnerable. And I say there's no better word for it than generational genocide. So I am worried about my country. I'm worried about the good people of America. I mean, they pick on the rural and the poverty, persons where there's poverty, and in rural Tennessee, which is just heart of the land people. And although we have terrible drug problems, and they're spending all this money on foster care when they should be actually doing total family rehabilitation with the drug issues. So they hate to see me walk in a courtroom. Of course, they don't have to now, but because I would have 5-day hearings, 6-day hearings. I had evidence. I brought in experts. I put on hours and hours of medical testimony. If there's a psych expert over here, I would go find another psych expert who would rebut everything that they said. But when a parent walked in a door and they told me they had to hire a private counsel because they didn't trust their court-appointed attorney, I would have to tell them it's going to cost you $50,000 to $100,000 to get your child out of foster care. And of course, most people can't do that. So I also have a nonprofit, the Family Forward Foundation, a 501c3. And I am hoping, one reason I'm here, brilliant people, I've had some great conversations. We have to have an international brain trust. And we have to have our great, incredible minds now reach to that next level, to university professors, to doctors, and be able to go out and sit down and talk to doctors. One of the presentations I do is the totem pole, and I see we have all these great minds up here that know the truth about children, and they know about, we have doctors and psychologists and brilliant lawyers and who've studied due process and human rights, and then you have the person at the bottom of the totem pole who's somebody who got their degree online, maybe in psychology, and they got 30 hours of training, and they're deciding to take children and remove them from their home. And then I also heard some discussion about jurists are not mental health people. So you cannot have judges rendering decisions on mental health diagnoses and then saying that it's not in the best interest of the child, which is another judicial cliche that we need to do away with. So we're working really hard for the CAPTA reauthorization, family advocates, because it's got to get either out of the courtroom or the people need to be empowered from that first knock on the door. And that's what I'm asking for. So if you have any questions, yeah.
We have the same in Sweden. We have the same in Sweden. We have a girl that died in a foster care. And when the child comes home to the parents again because of drugs. I followed the one in USA. That case was they changed the rules because of two foster care mother in one family, run away every time the social worker coming. So they run away, and next time it's coming, it's running away, and that one they're using against the parents.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so madness.
Yeah, yes, it is. And once you're ever in the system, now we have this generational, you're more likely to have your own kids taken. And what frightens me is I'm seeing a mental shift, a normalization, not just from the government side, but from the person's side. For instance, this 12-year-old child that I got back, she was so traumatized and so brainwashed, even in a 10-month period, that she ended up getting pregnant like a year and a half later. And when she was questioned about if the government came to take your baby away, what would you do about it? And she would say, well, I guess I'd have to give him my baby. And and she because she's been in foster care and she's been through that experience, and they convinced her when she was in foster care that her mother had to get better and she's better off here, even though it was a horrible experience. She now has a mentality that she would hand over her own child. And I can see that change in her and that damage. But that normalization, I did a lot of psychology before I did law, and did a lot of my master's program in psychology. And when we start changing that mentality, and I also studied anthropology, and I'm like, when 100 years from now they look back at our culture, what are they going to see, and how are they going to look at the familial bonds and familial relationship? And that's frightening to me.
I think that things you take up. This is not a fight for one country. It's
it's universal.
Human rights law, natural. Because if these natural rules, some broken down when they take the child, when they telling he do wrong, but they don't can prove it. It's not okay to take them. You must proving that it's a child that need care.
Right. And I prosecuted, and my very first trial, jury trial ever, was a baby murder, and a baby was actually murdered by this monster. And so I understand child abuse, but like I said, we know that only about 12 to 15% of the children that end up in out-of-home care are there because of physical or sexual abuse. And we need to be focusing on those children and what their needs are, because those children, we need real quality investigation. Child sexual abuse is one of the most horrendous, and they have so made it a commoners, I call it a commoners investigation, because 10 years ago we would have these extended forensic interviews of children when there was an allegation of sexual abuse, and we would have a real psychologist who would spend 6 or 7 or 8 sessions with a child, getting to know them, help them be comfortable, understand that relationship. Now they take a child who's made an allegation of sexual abuse and put him in a 10 by 12 room that looks like a police interrogation room with a 2-way mirror and cameras, and then they go, has anybody ever touched your privates? And then the next question may be, and what's your favorite food? I mean, the quality of investigation has so deteriorated that it's, and millions of dollars are being thrown into that, and the money is incredible. And of course now, in the US, we also, and I haven't heard anybody say this, I'm not sure if this is part of Norway and Sweden, but after you adopt a child in the US, you continue to get that money. You continue to get the monthly, it's a middle class welfare program, because that adoption entitlement money continues. That adoption entitlement money has now grown larger than the foster care money in some situations. Like in Tennessee, that alone is $10 million a month. So it's a middle class welfare program as well.
That's, I think, we have a different here. I don't think the parents have, when they take over, the foster care parents.
Yeah.
But
They're not interested to take over.
They don't take over. They
No,
just
they
stay
don't.
foster parents.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's better. They get more money.
But every people some be here, we meet the same things in USA, in Norway,
Yeah.
Sweden, probably in Danish
Denmark,
too,
yes.
everywhere. And like sexual abuse, I think I'll be up 4 times. 4 times. They even making the paper and they find out it's impossible, but it's not helping. The next people coming and next people coming, because then it's a social, what is the name? No, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't mention this, but I activated local media, and that's another reason why they hate me, is because I got our local news station, 2 different news stations, to do several stories on the local news. One of them got 1 million hits, and it was about whether or not criminals have more rights than parents. And then I also, over the past year, I had a local news reporter do about 30 different stories just on these kinds of stories about families and how, and he did a great job. I worked with him. I helped flesh out the stories, make sure they were good stories, and make sure that they were, there wasn't some secret or they weren't really abusers. And we actually got our commissioner fired because he just kept putting it out there. And so we've got local media needs to be activated, and it takes a lot of energy to do that, because again, you have to flesh out the stories, make sure they're good stories. You have to help the reporter. I invited him into my office. I had people there, had them interviewed. But and then the other thing, and through our social media programs in the U.S., we tell everybody record everything. And so now finally people are seeing videos that I videotaped stealing a child, my client's child, on 10 o'clock at night one night. I got up out of bed. I went to this parking lot where they made my clients go to turn over their 4-week-old baby, and I video live streamed the whole thing, and it got 200,000 views. And so that's another reason, like, we don't like her, because otherwise we can take babies and we just tell people, it was a bad situation, but this was a perfectly healthy baby they took out of the arms of this mom. So we're encouraging people, videotape it, share it, put it on. We had Saisha Mercado was a singer who won American's Idol, and they came and stopped her car on the street in Florida and took her baby out of her arms, live stream it on Instagram, and got lots of attention. So I want people to see this. We have videos of social workers coming in the door and saying, you either hand your kids over or I'm taking them anyway. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. So we need people to actually see this.
And I think it's amazing that it's beginning to come up now. Is that people are fighting 20 years. And the thing is, today we forgot everyone, this police, everyone, they hurt too. They do things they don't want because of system wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Probably social worker too.
Yeah.
They do what they should do in the work.
Yeah, well, and so I thank you what you're doing. I am happy to please and meet everybody, and thank you. And I hope I get to see you again.
Yes, thank you very much, Connie, for coming. You'll get your diploma before you leave.
Okay, thank you.
And please do not become the next Nancy Schafer.
No, yeah. Thank you. I watch my back a lot.
Yes. Då får jag tacka alla för visa, för att ni har varit